It's interesting that we have the Luke's Beatitudes. This is sometimes referred to as the Sermon on the Plain, because if you remember yesterday, Jesus came down from the mountain after he had chosen his 12 apostles. He stood on a stretch of level ground and he starts to preach. And this is contrasted a little bit with the Sermon on the Mount. Now, the Sermon on the Mount and the Sermon on the Plain have many of the same elements, but in the Sermon on the Plain, as it is sometimes called, you have the four Beatitudes, and then you have the four woes. And so in St. Matthew it says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." Luke just says, "Blessed are the poor." And then he says, "Woe to you who are rich." And, today we celebrate St. John Chrysostom. St. John Chrysostom was the bishop in what was then Constantinople, is now Istanbul. He was the bishop there, and he preached powerfully, eloquently. His great gift was that he was a great preacher that could make a point and make it stick. And when he made his point and he made it stick, he convicted people of their need to be generous, to change their lives, to be concerned with the poor. And guess how he was rewarded for his capacity to convict people? He was exiled. We had enough of you. We don't want to hear you. And so the message of the gospel at times is so challenging to us that we can't hardly hear it. I made this point last night when we were reading the book. Who can listen to Jesus? Because he was talking about eating my body and drinking my blood. Who can listen to this man? Well, when he says this kind of thing, and when he's talking to these people, none of these people have air conditioning. None of these people have a car. None of these people have a maid, or very few of them might have. Some of them might, who knows. They don't have hot and cold running water in their houses. They don't have food prepared for them all the time. So we fail to recognize how rich we are. And I speak about myself too. And so I am woed. Jesus is saying to Mike O'Connor, "Woe to you." And Paul says to me in this reading that we had just a moment ago from the Colossians, "Put to death the parts of you that are earthly." What do we call that? We have a special word in the church, a church word, for putting the things to death that are earthly. It's called mortification. It's a happy sounding word, isn't it? Sounds like mortician. Okay, well, it has to do with death. It has to do with mortification, has to do with putting to death those parts of us. And how is it, my brothers and sisters in Christ, that we put those earthly parts of us to death? There's three of them, three principal ways: prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And let me tell you, this gospel should rattle us modern Americans with all of the luxuries that we have that we take absolutely for granted. And don't think we're rich at all because we're in debt. Or don't think we're rich at all because somebody else we know is richer. St. John Chrysostom had the capacity to convict his hearers, and his hearers had two choices: to beat their breasts and ask for God's mercy and strive for mortification, or to say, "Who can listen to you? We need a new bishop. We don't like this bishop." And so, my brothers and sisters, let us be challenged by the gospel. Last point I want to make is, one of the things about the whole of the gospel is that the gospel necessitates God's mercy on all of us. Does that make sense? The gospel is so challenging that we are left simply standing before God saying, Lord, have mercy on me. But we can't just stop there. We do have to put to death those parts of us that are earthly by prayer, by fasting, and by giving.